Welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast, everyone. Today, we're going to be looking at INDI Semiconductor,
Okay.
ticker symbol INDI. They're making some interesting moves in the automotive chip world,
Yeah,
but also hitting some roadblocks lately.
for sure.
You probably heard about the market's ups and downs,
Yeah.
especially with tech and AI.
Yeah.
But what's really going on with INDI Semiconductor?
Right.
We've got our market guru here to help us break it all down.
Well, it is a fascinating case study.
Yeah.
INDI Semiconductor really embodies this tension between innovation and economic uncertainty that we're seeing across the market.
Absolutely. And their stock price is a testament to that roller coaster.
Uh-huh.
INDI opened at $3.97 today,
Okay.
a long way from their all-time high of $16.33 back in November 2021.
That's right. And that downward trend really took a sharp turn after their fourth quarter 2024 earnings report came out on February 20th.
Yeah, that 9.1% drop in one day was a serious wake-up call.
Big one.
What happened there?
Well, the earnings report itself had some good news and bad news.
Mhm.
On the positive side, their revenue reached $58 million,
All right.
a 7.5% increase from the previous quarter.
Not bad.
In this market, that's not insignificant.
I was going to say that's pretty impressive given the overall economic climate.
It is, but here's where things get interesting.
Okay.
Their guidance for the first quarter of 2025 fell short of what analysts were expecting.
Yeah.
They're predicting revenue somewhere between $52.5 and $57.5 million.
Which is considerably lower than the $61.34 million analysts had projected.
Exactly. And that gap between expectations and reality is what spooked investors, leading to the stock price drop.
So is this just an INDI Semiconductor problem, or is there a bigger issue at play?
That's the key question.
Yeah.
To understand INDI Semiconductor situation, we have to zoom out and look at the broader market trends.
All right, let's zoom out. What's the bigger picture telling us?
Right now, the U.S. stock market is facing some headwinds.
Okay.
The S&P 500 is down. The Dow Jones is down. There's a lot of nervousness surrounding tariffs, the strong U.S. dollar, and the overall economic outlook.
And how does this impact a company like INDI Semiconductor specifically?
Well, tech and AI stocks, which
Right.
includes semiconductor companies like INDI Semiconductor, are particularly sensitive to these economic tremors.
So it's not just INDI Semiconductor feeling the pressure.
Right.
We're seeing similar patterns across the entire sector.
Absolutely. Look at NVIDIA, for example.
Hmm.
They recently saw a dip in their stock price, and the overall chip index is sliding. It's definitely a trend.
You know, seeing that drop in the chip index makes me wonder, is it all just general market jitters?
Yeah?
Or are there fundamental issues within the chip-making industry itself?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it brings us to the automotive semiconductor sector, where INDI Semiconductor is playing.
Right, so let's dive into that.
Yeah.
What's the state of play in automotive chips right now?
In the long run, the automotive chip sector has huge potential. Think about the growing demand for advanced driver assistance systems, known as ADAS, and the booming electric vehicle market.
Right, with more and more cars incorporating features like lane departure warnings, adaptive cruise control, and even self-driving capabilities. The need for these advanced chips is only going to increase.
Exactly. There's a lot of room for growth in the long term,
Yeah.
but in the short term, there's also a lot of uncertainty and challenges.
What kind of challenges?
We're talking about those ongoing tariff threats, the strong U.S. dollar we mentioned earlier, and the possibility of an economic slowdown.
Right.
All of those factors create a tricky environment for companies like INDI Semiconductor.
So it's this push and pull between the long-term potential of the market and these very real short-term obstacles.
Precisely, and that's where things get interesting. When we start analyzing INDI Semiconductor's prospects.
All right, let's bring it back to INDI Semiconductor. Is this a bargain stock opportunity right now, or is there more trouble ahead?
Well, there are definitely conflicting signals to consider.
What are we seeing?
On the one hand, analyst price targets are significantly higher than the current stock price.
Okay.
Benchmark Company, for instance, predicts INDI Semiconductor could hit $9.
Wow.
The general consensus is somewhere around $7 to $8.
So there's a sense that the stock might be undervalued with potential for a rebound.
There is, but that's contingent on Indie Semiconductor overcoming these challenges we've been discussing.
But there are those lingering concerns about the broader market and those production ramp delays.
Yeah.
It feels like a bit of a gamble at this point.
It does, and that's why it's important for every investor to carefully evaluate their own risk tolerance and investment strategy when considering Indie Semiconductor.
That's a great point. So for our listeners out there, think about this. Are you feeling bullish on Indie Semiconductor's long-term prospects in the automotive tech space? Or does the current market feel too risky for your investment style?
It's a good question.
This is such a clear example of how both a company's individual performance and the broader market forces play a role in smart investing decisions.
Absolutely. It's a delicate balancing act that every investor has to navigate.
We'll be back in a moment to unpack all of this even further, so stick with us.
It really is, and that's why we spend so much time on this podcast, talking about both the individual company fundamentals and the macro trends that can influence their success.
Right, it's all connected. So let's zoom back in on Indie Semiconductor for a moment. Okay. For listeners who might not be familiar, can you tell us a bit more about what they actually do and what makes them stand out in the automotive chip space?
So Indie Semiconductor specializes in designing and manufacturing chips and software, specifically for the automotive industry. What's key here is they're not just making generic chips. They're developing highly specialized components tailored to the unique demands of vehicles.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
What are some examples of the specific types of chips they're producing?
They have a diverse product portfolio, but some of their key focus areas are those advanced driver assistance systems we mentioned earlier, the ADAS.
Right.
These are the chips that are enabling features like lane departure warnings, adaptive cruise control, and even autonomous driving capabilities.
It's the technology that's making cars smarter and safer.
Precisely. They also produce chips for user experience applications.
Okay.
Things like infotainment systems, touchscreens, and advanced audio processing.
So they're involved in both the brains and the entertainment of the car. That's interesting.
It is, and let's not forget about the electrification trend.
Right.
Indie Semiconductor is also a major player in providing chips for electric vehicles, or EVs.
Now that's where things get really interesting, because the EV market is absolutely exploding right now.
It is, and Indie Semiconductor is well-positioned to capitalize on that growth.
Yeah.
They provide chips for things like battery management systems, powertrain control, and other critical EV components.
So when we talk about Indie Semiconductor's long-term potential, a lot of that hinges on the continued growth and adoption of EVs.
Absolutely. But as we discussed earlier, there are also those short-term challenges to consider.
Right, the tariffs, the economic uncertainty, and the production ramp delays. It all adds up.
It does, but I think it's important to highlight that Indie Semiconductor isn't just sitting back and waiting for things to improve.
They're taking proactive steps to address these challenges.
Exactly. They're actively working to diversify their supply chain, explore new markets, and are investing heavily in research and development to stay ahead of the curve.
So there's a sense of optimism and proactive problem solving within the company, despite these headwinds.
There is, and they have a strong track record of innovation and execution.
Which might explain why those analyst price targets we talked about earlier are so much higher than the current stock price. The experts seem to believe that Indie Semiconductor has what it takes to weather the storm and emerge stronger on the other side.
That's the prevailing sentiment, but as always, it's crucial for investors to conduct their own due diligence and make informed decisions based on their own research and risk tolerance.
You know, thinking about Indie Semiconductor's focus on EVs, it makes me wonder, wouldn't it make strategic sense for them to partner with some of the major EV manufacturers out there?
That's a smart observation. And you know what they've already done?
They have.
Indie Semiconductor has established partnerships with several leading EV companies, including Tesla.
Wow, Tesla. That's a pretty big deal.
It is, and it says a lot about Indie Semiconductor's credibility and their technological capabilities.
It's not just some small startup trying to get a foothold in the market.
Right.
They're a serious player with established relationships in the industry.
Right, and those partnerships are going to be essential for Indie Semiconductor's future success.
It gives them access to a rapidly growing market and allows them to collaborate with some of the top innovators in the EV space.
Exactly. It's a mutually beneficial situation.
Okay, so we've talked about the positives, we've talked about the challenges. Let's get real here. What are the biggest risks facing Indie Semiconductor?
Okay.
What could potentially derail their success?
Well, as we've discussed, the macroeconomic environment is a major risk factor.
Right.
A global recession, escalating trade wars, or a significant slowdown in the automotive market could have a serious impact on Indie Semiconductor's business.
Those are pretty substantial systemic risks that are hard to predict or control.
They are, and then there's the competitive landscape to consider. The semiconductor industry is incredibly competitive,
Yeah.
with giants like NVIDIA and Qualcomm constantly vying for market share.
So Indie Semiconductor needs to constantly innovate and stay ahead of the curve to maintain their competitive edge.
Absolutely, and they need to manage their growth effectively. Scaling up production, expanding into new markets, and integrating new technologies all come with their own sets of challenges.
It's a delicate balance. Grow too quickly and you risk overextending yourself.
Right.
Grow too slowly and you risk falling behind.
Exactly. And we can't forget about the ever-evolving regulatory landscape.
Mhm.
Governments around the world are constantly implementing new regulations related to autonomous driving, data privacy, and cybersecurity.
That's right. Indie Semiconductor needs to be agile and adaptable to navigate these changing regulations,
They do, and they need to stay ahead of the technological curve.
especially in the world of tech, where what's considered cutting edge today might be obsolete tomorrow.
Very true. So continuous investment in research and development is going to be crucial for Indie Semiconductor to maintain their technological advantage.
Okay, so we've covered the risks. Let's shift gears and end on a more positive note.
Mhm.
What are some of the most exciting developments happening at Indie Semiconductor right now?
Okay.
What are they working on that makes you particularly optimistic about their future?
One area that I find really fascinating is their work on artificial intelligence, or AI.
AI is everywhere these days.
It is.
How is Indie Semiconductor incorporating AI into their automotive solutions?
They're using AI to enhance the capabilities of their ADAS chips,
Okay.
enabling more sophisticated driver assistance features and paving the way for fully autonomous vehicles.
So Indie Semiconductor is actively shaping the future of self-driving cars.
They are, and they're also using AI to improve user experiences within vehicles.
Uh-huh.
Imagine a car that can anticipate your needs, learn your preferences, and personalize your driving experience.
That sounds almost like something out of a sci-fi movie.
I know, right? But it's becoming a reality, and Indie Semiconductor is at the forefront of this innovation.
Another area that's really intriguing is their focus on edge computing.
Ah, yes. Edge computing is definitely a game changer for the automotive industry.
For those of us who aren't tech wizards,
Yeah.
can you explain what edge computing is in simple terms?
Essentially, edge computing brings data processing closer to the source of the data.
Okay.
In the context of vehicles, it means processing data directly within the car, rather than relying on the cloud.
Why is that so important?
It allows for much faster processing speeds, reduced latency, and increased reliability.
So things like real-time decision-making for autonomous driving become much more efficient and effective.
Exactly. And it also enhances data privacy and security, because sensitive data doesn't have to be transmitted to the cloud.
So Indie Semiconductor is incorporating edge computing into its chip designs.
They are, and they're developing software solutions to enable edge computing capabilities within vehicles.
All of this is making me really excited about the future of automotive technology.
Yeah, me too.
Cars are evolving into something far beyond just vehicles.
Uh-huh.
They're becoming sophisticated, connected, and intelligent machines.
They are, and Indie Semiconductor is playing a key role in driving that transformation.
Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into Indie Semiconductor, what are the key takeaways for our listeners? What should they be thinking about when it comes to Indie Semiconductor and the broader automotive chip market?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's important to understand that the automotive chip market is a long-term growth story.
Despite the current bumps in the road that we've discussed.
Exactly. The demand for smarter, safer, and more connected vehicles is only going to increase in the coming years.
Yeah.
And companies like Indie Semiconductor are well positioned to benefit from this trend.
But it's not a guaranteed win.
Right.
There are risks and challenges to consider.
Absolutely. The macroeconomic environment, the competitive landscape, and the evolving regulatory landscape can all impact Indie Semiconductor's performance.
So it's essential for investors to stay informed, do their research, and understand both the potential rewards and the potential risk before making any investment decisions.
Couldn't agree more.
Indie Semiconductor is a fascinating company, operating in a dynamic and rapidly evolving industry. It'll be interesting to see how their story unfolds in the months and years to come.
It will, and I have a feeling it's going to be an exciting ride.
Speaking of exciting rides, I think it's time for us to wrap up this episode of Investing Talk podcast.
Sounds good to me.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from INDI Semiconductor's recent stock performance and earnings report to their role in the automotive chip market and the broader trends shaping the industry.
We've discussed the company's strengths, its weaknesses, and the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead.
As always, we encourage you to do your own research and come to your own conclusions about INDI Semiconductor and its investment potential. And remember, investing in the stock market always carries risks. Never invest more than you can afford to lose.
Good advice.
We hope you found this episode informative and insightful. If you did, be sure to subscribe to Investing Talk Podcast and leave us a review. We really appreciate your support.
And feel free to share this episode with your friends and family who might be interested in learning more about INDI Semiconductor or the automotive chip market in general.
We love spreading the knowledge and helping people make informed investment decisions. Thanks for tuning in.
We do. And listener feedback is always appreciated.
Now, before we sign off, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought.
Okay.
We spent a lot of time today talking about INDI Semiconductor's numbers,
Yeah.
their market position, the technology they're developing.
Right.
But at the end of the day, investing isn't just about crunching numbers.
That's so true. It's about understanding the stories behind those numbers, the why, behind the what.
Exactly. And INDI Semiconductor has a really compelling story.
Yeah.
They're not just a chip manufacturer. They have a vision for the future of transportation.
A future where cars are not only vehicles, but extensions of our digital lives.
Right.
Smarter, safer, more connected than ever before.
And they're not just talking about this future. They're actively building it.
They are.
They're developing the chips, the software, the partnerships that are making this vision a reality.
Excited.
So as you're evaluating your investment options, don't just focus on the charts and graphs. Dig a little deeper. Understand the companies, the people, the innovations that are driving the market forward.
Do your research think critically and, most importantly, make informed decisions that align with your own financial goals and risk tolerance?
That's such an important point.
Yeah.
There's no one-size-fits-all approach to investing.
Absolutely not. Each investor has their own unique circumstances and goals.
Well said. And remember, investing is a journey, not a destination. Enjoy the ride.
Enjoy the ride indeed.
This has been Investing Talk Podcast. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll be back next week with another episode of Investing Talk Podcast.
Until then, happy investing, everyone.
And don't forget to subscribe to Investing Talk Podcast. Leave us a review and share this episode with your friends. We appreciate your support.